Why, hello there. Um, so some of you may be wondering why I am taking video in black and white. Well, if you think about it, it's not really all in black and white. There are shades of gray, shades of more gray, and other shades of gray everywhere in this world. Curious thing, nothing is ever really black and white. Um, I'm going to be reading a chapter that views things as black and white. Um, so take it with a grain of salt. One of my goals for this channel is to read arguments and ideas and backstories from each side and to keep it kind of balanced, even though I'm pretty biased. But maybe this will provide a forum for us to argue points of view. My roommate let me borrow this book, as did another friend of Anarchism and the Other Essays by Emma Goldman. This book, though, that my roommate let me borrow, she claims is a book that got her to go back to church. We talked about it all of a night, or at least for a couple hours, and I felt very, very moved by the things I very much want to say to her, but I didn't really want to assert my opinion quite yet. I wanted to think about it and go through and understand what and where she was coming from. So she's letting me borrow this book, and now I'm going to read through this book chapter by chapter, at least the ones that seem interesting enough. She told me the first chapter, at least one of the first chapters, was at least book one, was why she got back into going to church again, even though she disagrees with church organizations in general, but is still religious. So let's go on an adventure, eh? The good thing about C.S. Lewis is that in this book in particular, he doesn't write very long chapters, so these should be quick and filled with lots of opinions. The book is called Mere Christianity. Let's see. C.S. Lewis lived from 1898 to 1963, about the same time as Miss Emma Goldman. And this book, let's see, it was published in copyright in 1952. Wonderful. So book one is called Right and Wrong, as a clue to the meaning of the universe. This chapter is called The Law of Human Nature. I will preface this by the fact that I took a class a couple years back in college, and we spent the entire semester trying to define what nature is. Turns out it is extremely difficult to pin down. Human nature might be a little bit easier, but C.S. Lewis, we'll see what he can do with this chapter, okay? All right. Everyone has heard people quarreling. Sometimes it sounds funny, and sometimes it sounds merely unpleasant. But however it sounds, I believe we can learn something very important from listening to the kind of things they say. They say things like this: how'd you like it if anyone did the same to you? That's my seat. I was there first. Leave him alone. He isn't doing you any harm. Why should you shove in first? Give me a bit of your orange. I gave you a bit of mine. Come on, you promised. People say things like that every day. educated people as well as uneducated, and children as well as grown-ups. Now, what interests me about all these remarks is that the man who does who makes them is not merely saying that other man's behavior does not happen to please him. He's appealing to the same kind of standard of behavior which he expects the other man to know about. And the other man very seldom replies, "To hell with your standard." Nearly always, he tries to make out that what he has been doing does not really go against the standard, or that if it does, there's some special excuse. He pretends that there's some special reason in this particular case why the person who took the seat first should not keep it, or that things were quite different when he was given the bit of orange, or that something has turned up which lets him off keeping his promise. It looks, in fact, very much as if both parties had in mind some kind of law or rule of fair play, or decent behavior, or morality, or whatever you like to call it, about which they really agreed. And they have. If they had not, they might, of course, fight like animals. But they cannot quarrel in the human sense of the word. Humans are animals? Quarreling means trying to show that the other man is in the wrong, and there would be no sense in trying to do that unless you and he had some sort of agreement as to what right and wrong are. Just as there would be no sense in saying that a footballer had committed a foul unless there was some agreement about the rules of football. Now, this law, he capitalizes law, rule, right and wrong, just letting you know, like they were some kind of scientific theory, or at least he wants to draw attention to it. Now, this law or rule about right and wrong used to be called the law of nature. Nowadays, when we talk of the laws of nature, we usually mean things like gravitation or heredity, or the laws of chemistry. But when the old thinkers called the law of right and wrong the law of nature, they really meant the law of human nature. That's because they were anthropomorphic. The idea was that just as all bodies are governed by the law of gravitation and organisms by biological laws, so the creature called man also had his law, with this great difference that a body could not choose whether it obeyed the law of gravitation or not, but a man could choose either to obey the law of human nature or to disobey it. We may put this in another way. Each man is at every moment subjected to several different sets of law, but there is only one of these which he is free to disobey. As a body, he is subjected to gravitation and cannot disobey it. If you leave him unsupported in midair, he has no more choice about falling than a stone does. As an organism, he is subjected to various biological laws which he cannot disobey any more than any animal can. That is, he cannot disobey those laws which he shares with other things, but the law which is peculiar to his human nature, the law he does not share with animals or vegetables or inorganic things, is the one he can disobey if he chooses. Lie. Let's take the golden rule, for instance. It may be peculiar and specific to human nature because we're the only ones who put a name to it, but we're not the only ones who follow it. What we do not share with animals, I think, is that we have a much higher awareness of the pain and suffering that we inflict on others. Dolphins are aware of the pain they cause seals when they play with them before they eat them. But they have their own social constructions, and they're complicated. These laws that he's talking about are social constructions. They have nothing to do with Christianity. Absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. This law was called the law of nature because people thought that everyone knew it by nature, did not need to be taught it. Okay. Lie. They did not mean, of course, that you might not find an odd individual here or there who did not know it, just as you find a few people who are colorblind or have no ear for tune. But taking the race as a whole, they thought that the human idea of decent behavior was obvious to everyone, and I believe they were right. If they were not, then all the things we said about the war were nonsense. What was the sense in saying the enemy were in the wrong unless right is a real thing, which the Nazis at bottom knew as well as we did and ought to have practiced? If they had had no notion of what we mean by right, then though we might still have had to fight them, we can no more have blamed them for that than for the color of their hair. This is absolute nonsense. This is absolute nonsense. Let's go back to the middle portion of that. But taking the race as a whole, they thought that the human idea of decent behavior was obvious to everyone, and I believe they were right. It is not obvious to everyone. In fact, there have been children who have been born to parents who were not very well taken care of. That they were kept in a small room and were not given social interaction, were not given very good food, that were treated like shit. They never developed language. They never developed to be at a certain age. They never developed any sense of morality when they could have. Granted, maybe they had some genetic defect. There's some evidence of that. But there is also evidence that because they weren't given proper social interaction and the nutrients to fuel the development of the brain, they never could develop actually being what we call a normal, decent human being. It is not intrinsic for people to have a sense of morality. Morality comes from society. Society constructs morality. It's a social construction. It has nothing to do with this deep-seated feeling of what we're supposed to do, who we're supposed to be, and how we're supposed to act every day. absolutely disagree with him. I know that some people say the idea of a law of nature or decent behavior known to all men is unsound. I still really, I'm probably going to hate this whole book. Referring to humans as men. It's completely sexist. Men is not the standard for being a human. Anyways, I know that some people say the idea of a law of nature or decent behavior known to all men is unsound because different civilizations in different ages have had quite different moralities. But this is not true. There have been differences between their moralities, but these have never amounted to anything like a total difference. If anyone will take the trouble to compare the moral teaching of, say, the ancient Egyptians, Babylonians, Hindus, Chinese, Greeks, and Romans, what will really strike him will be how very like they are to each other and to our own. Some of the evidence for this I have put together in the appendix of another book called The Abolition of Man. But for our present purpose, I need only ask the reader to think what a totally different morality would mean. Think of a country where people are admired for running away in battle and where a man felt proud of double-crossing all the people who had been kindest to him. You might just as well try to imagine a country where two and two made five. Social construction. Men have differed as regards that people you ought to be unselfish too, whether it was only your own family or your fellow countrymen or everyone. But they have always agreed that you ought not to put yourself first. Selfishness has never been admired. Men have differed as to whether you should have one wife or four, but they have always agreed that you must not simply have any woman you liked. That's also a lie. So good. He made a point that there are a lot of cultures and religions that agree on things such as the Golden Rule. Thus, it's called the Golden Rule, and it's recognized worldwide, for the most part. But look, the Golden Rule is still not the same across all cultures. It's similar, but it's not the same. And that's because as we have developed as a society, as different societies and different peoples, that we have come to the conclusions that it benefits us evolutionarily to have empathy. We actually have mirror neurons in our brains that help us interact with people, that we can look at someone and mirror exactly what they're doing, and it signals an understanding between two people, at least two people. So this is actually evolution that he's talking about, and he doesn't know it at all. He's right. Our society would be a different type of society. It wouldn't be a society, really, if had we been unable to develop a sense of empathy for one another and any other morals associated with empathy. So that's what I have to say about that. All right. Couple more paragraphs. But the most sorry about the sound. But the most remarkable thing in this, wherever you find a man who says he does not believe in real right and wrong, you will find the same man going back on this a moment later. He may break his promise to you, but you try breaking one to him, he will be complaining it's not fair before you can say Jack Robinson. A nation may say treaties don't matter, but then next minute they spoil their case by saying that the particular treaty they want to break is an unfair one. But if treaties do not matter, and if there is no such thing as right and wrong, in other words, there is no law of nature, What is the difference between a fair treaty and an unfair one? Have they not let the cat out of the bag and shown that whatever they say, they really know the law of nature just like anyone else? It seems then we are forced to believe in a real right and wrong, a real black and white. People may be sometimes mistaken about them, just as people sometimes get their sums wrong. Or sums that disagree with your original social construction is pretty much what he's saying. But they are not a matter of mere taste and opinion any more than a multiplication table. If we are agreed about that, I go on to my next point, which is this. None of us are really keeping the law of nature. If there are any exceptions among you, I apologize to them. They had much better read some other book, for nothing I am going to say concerns them. And now turning to the ordinary human beings who are left. I hope you will not misunderstand what I'm going to say. I am not preaching, and heaven knows I do not pretend to be better than anyone else. I am only trying to call attention to the fact that this year, or this month, or more likely this very day, we have failed to practice ourselves the kind of behavior we expect from other people. There may be all sorts of excuses for us. That time you were so unfair to the children was when you were very tired. That slightly shady business about the money, the one you had almost forgotten, came when you were very hard up. That sounds really dirty. And what you promised to do for old so-and-so and have never done, well, you never would have promised if you had known how frightfully busy you were going to be. And as for your behavior to your wife or husband or sister or brother, if I know how irritating they could be, I would not wonder at it. And who the dickens am I anyway? I'm just the same. This is to say, I do not succeed in keeping the law of nature very well, and the moment anyone tells me I'm not keeping it, there starts up in my mind a string of excuses as long as your arm. The question at the moment is not whether they are good excuses. The point is that they are one more proof of how deeply, whether we like it or not, we believe in the law of nature. Because it's pounded into our head every day, all around us, all the time. If we do not believe in decent behavior, why should we be so anxious to make excuses for not having behaved decently? The truth is, we believe in decency so much, we feel the rule of law pressing on us so that we cannot bear to face the fact that we are breaking it and consequently trying to shift the responsibility. For you, notice that it is only our bad behavior that we find all these explanations. It is only our bad temper that we put down to being tired or worried or hungry. We put our good temper down to ourselves. That's why, instead of attributing our actions to someone other than ourselves, we need to take full responsibility for our actions. Full fucking responsibility. These, then, are the 2 points I want to make. First, that human beings all over the earth have this curious idea that they ought to behave in a certain way and cannot really get rid of it. As long as their social institution maintains and continues to maintain it every single day, year, century, through books, through education, through interaction, through body language, through facial expression, we can get rid of it. We can get rid of laws. Certain aspects of these nature laws that he's talking about, these human nature laws. One of them is the marriage and relationship of two people of the same sex, for instance. We're changing our conception of that as a mass civilization, as a whole society, because the evidence is so strong against just being heterosexual. Look it up. There is a lot of evidence. I think it's that there's around, I want to say, over 1,000 other species in this world that exhibit homosexual behavior, same-sex behavior, over 1,000. It might be 10,000, but it's definitely over 1,000. There's quite a bit of scientific evidence for thwarting against these preconceptions that we have about what nature really is and what it really prescribes and what is true and right, what's wrong, what is moral, and what is not. We can get rid of it. We ought not have to behave in a certain way. This is not true. There is a standard for which we fall under because it benefits us evolutionarily. We couldn't have gotten to this point without being able to establish teamwork running through the prairies over 3.1 million years ago, developing into bipeds, and being able to hunt. All right. Secondly, that they do not in fact behave in that way. They know the law of nature. They break it. These two facts are the foundation of all clear thinking about ourselves and the universe we live in. Social constructions are only constructions to thwart, not to thwart, to face his second point about knowing the law of nature and breaking it. He still hasn't defined exactly what the law of nature is. He's defined that it is good and bad things, and the moral and the absence of morality. But what are you breaking? I don't understand. I don't understand, Mr. Lewis. What are you breaking? There's cultures that have grown to, I don't know, engage in cannibalism. It was never bad in their society. That it was only bad until someone told them it was bad. And now they perpetuate the idea that cannibalism is wrong. So it wasn't bad until someone told them it was. These are all social constructions. And the only thing you're going to break is preconceptions of what is good and what is bad. That's the only thing you're breaking. These two facts are the foundation of all clear thinking about ourselves and the universe we live in. I would absolutely disagree. I would go with Mr. Dusty Smith in saying that the true basis for clear thinking about ourselves and the universe we live in is fucking logic. It's logic. Logic and rational thinking. by taking evidence and ideas from all of the aspects of science. There's many different sciences, but we can use the ideas and evidence and scientific study to clearly think about who we are, our morals, and the universe around us. Wow, this has been great. You know what's even greater is the next chapter is called Some Objections. So I'm excited to see what Mr. Lewis has to say about his own argument and if they're similar to my objections to his arguments. See you tomorrow.